Support for This News is So Gay comes from the LGBTQ Plus Opportunity Fund of the Cleveland Foundation, leveraging philanthropy to empower LGBTQ plus communities. Welcome to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, editor of The Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ plus newsroom. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's what we're covering on this week's episode. The fatal shootings of Renee Good and Alex Pretti in Minneapolis have hit the LGBTQ plus community hard and spawned some questionable media coverage. What is the latest that you all need to know? Journalists are being arrested. What does that mean for our work? The Supreme Court heard two cases that could determine the fate of how states protect trans athletes, what went down inside the courtroom, and of course, queer joy. I swear there is some. Where is our roundtable finding queer joy in the news right now? Joining us this week to answer those questions and so many more, Managing Director for News is Out, a national collaborative of the leading local queer news publishers, of which the Buckeye Flame is a proud affiliate, Dana Piccoli. Dana, welcome back to the show.
Hello, good to be here.
Host of The Gaily Show, airing every weekday on AM 950 radio in Minneapolis and WCPT 820 in Chicago, John Parker. John Parker, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ken. It's great to be here.
And joining us for the first time, Steve Elkins Fellow and White House Correspondent for the Washington Blade, covering LGBTQ plus news, culture, and community stories across Washington, D.C., but affecting the whole freaking country. Joe Reberkenny. Joe, what a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you all for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to get into some headlines.
Let's get into it. Our LGBTQ plus reporters roundtable is now assembled, so let's dive in. So, in full transparency, the four of us were supposed to assemble a few weeks ago, but then some sort of polar vortex hit and said, no, you guys are staying home. And then I was going to feel lazy this weekend and use exactly the same prep packet that I sent you all a few weeks ago. But of course, so much has happened in the past 2 weeks. But I really do want to start where we would have started a few weeks ago, with a check-in to see how you all are doing in these pretty nutty times to be a queer journalist. Dana, how you doing?
Honestly, not great. I'm lucky to be in the Portland area where there's a lot of community, amazing advocacy and activism, but it's hard not to just feel overwhelmed by the news. I mean, I'm in the news. I report on the news and I'm overwhelmed by it. But therapy helps.
I'm a fan. This does not count as that, both panelists and listeners, so please don't bill us for that. John, we'll talk about where you geographically are in just a few, but first, how you doing, John Parker?
I was going to say, so I am in Minneapolis, and what we're doing below sub temperatures, we could have made this work, Ohio. We could have made this work. Y'all just had a couple inches of snow. I mean, come on. We're defending democracy in negative 20-degree temperatures. So
that's the most Midwestern thing to do, is to rib another Midwestern state over not being brave enough to go out into the black ice.
And I'm from New Jersey, so I really don't care. So it's fine. I resist it entirely.
No, I'm here. Yeah.
You're here.
It's no one got murdered over the weekend, so I guess that's the bar that we're setting things now here in Minneapolis.
Oh, gosh. Okay, we will get into that. And Joe, you're in D.C. It's not like things are quiet there. How are you doing?
All right, question mark.
Yeah.
It's also freezing here. So, I know you Midwestern people like to take that with pride, but I'm not used to this, and I hate it. It's just the ice and the snow covering the city is only adding to the already feeling of unease that's been happening since everything has happened over the past 2 years, really, pretty much. We're all figuring out how to maneuver both the ice and protests that are happening more and more as, people are getting more outraged with everything. It's exhausting. And I second Dana. Therapy is my silver bullet right now. So that and Drag Race.
And Drag Race. We'll talk about that too. That might come up. Well, let's dive into some of these headlines. Organizers in Minneapolis called for a national day of action last week after ICE agents shot and killed Alex Pretti and Renee Good all in the past month. Renee Good, an out LGBTQ plus individual. There were indeed protests across the country, certainly here in Cleveland, and some really questionable media coverage. And John, when we discussed this over email, the word that you used for me regarding the media coverage, your feelings about it, you were vexed. And that was a couple weeks ago. So I don't know if the word has changed, but what are you seeing out there from our colleagues regarding media coverage?
So, and I know Dana, Joe, Ken, you know this, as queer folks, we're used to people lying about the queer community, like, and the press just sort of running with that. But I feel it's taken a whole different diabolical level here, particularly with the videos, like Don't Believe What You're Seeing. And we all see, right, the 7 videos of Alex Pretti, the 5 or 6 documenting Renee Good's death. But what I was taught was if you have a source that is unreliable, you do not rely on them, right? Like that's just sort of a given. And that's like basic fundamental journalism. But here, because it's the DHS, it's the federal government, local outlets are just running with whatever they say, even though we're literally finding out either in real time or days later that what they're saying is complete bullshit. We were covering Alex Pretty's death like in real time. Like I'm literally like recording stuff and having to re-record stuff and posting things on Blue Sky. And I'm watching local media outlets like showing a photo of the gun. And I'm looking at that going, is that gun real? Like there are other photos they've shown on the DHS accounts that are from like 4 or 5 years ago. There's no context. All you see is a gun on a chair. Now, after independent verification, yes, it was the gun. But like, I am so frustrated that so many outlets are just running with, hey, this is what the government has said. This is what DHS says. This is what ICE says. And then 3 days later, they have to go, oh, well, actually, this is what actually happened here. And so I find it very frustrating to be in this environment right now. Like we've taken the editorial opinion at the Gaily show. We will not say anything that DHS says until it has been verified by somebody else. That's how like bad it is. And like I won't show any press conference. You know, MS Now really, I was impressed with MS Now because things were happening on the day. They actually pulled away from a Kristi Noem press conference because they were like, she's lying. I was screaming at the TV. She's lying. I am literally covering this on the ground. She's effing lying. Why are you showing this right now? And they pulled away to their credit and said, no, this is all lies. We'll figure this out later to tell you the difference. So I think for me, that is where the vexation is coming from. But I am very curious to hear from y'all about how this should be handled as journalists when the government is lying through their teeth like literally every second of every day.
Yeah, Dana, the subject line in a News is Out email, and if folks are not subscribed to News is Out, you must, because you get coverage from all across the country. The line was, quote, "This week in our community, grief and resolve." You're someone who's regularly looking at LGBTQ plus coverage across the country. What were you seeing?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of anger, but also just this deep sadness and fear in our community. And when the news first broke about the death of Renee Good, a video kind of subsequently came out of somebody videoing her wife, and she was just sitting there shocked and devastated. And I was trying to piece things together, and I immediately started reaching out to my media friends in the Midwest. Ken, I reached out to you. I reached out to my friend Matt over in Windy City, because I could see that this would soon be confirmed that Good was part of the community. And it's a massive loss. And I think that we're so used to loving a country that doesn't love us back. But now it's about loving a country that's actively harming us without retribution. And I think the calls for justice around the country are deafening.
And the gaslighting, right? I mean, I know what gaslighting is because, I've dated in the gay male community, but I will say that there's like videos, and when the videos are a direct contrast with the verbiage that's getting out there, of course it's going to make people angry. And Joe, you covered a protest in DC in the wake of Renee Good's killing, hundreds of folks there. What were the emotions going through that crowd?
Yeah, so I was actually at a colleague. He was doing a conversation about covering the LGBTQ community, which wasn't super close to the White House, but close enough where as soon as the talk was over, I checked my phone and it was blowing up with people who were blocking off streets, marching, screaming, banging pots and pans, just getting as much and as loud as they could be to voice that the American people, and specifically DMV residents, for those unfamiliar, District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, are not going to put up with it. I hopped on a bike and got over there as fast as I could. Thank God for not snowing yet. Got there, and as I was getting there, it was starting to die down. I saw maybe about 100 people, maybe a little bit less. But the anger, people fed up with being told lies point blank, despite seeing so much clear evidence pointing to the other explanation, which is that this is murders being condoned by the state, and anger was the central feeling that I got from people. They are just so pissed off at everything going on and the fight that we're still having to have. I was able to talk to the lawyer of Renee Good, actually, Antonio Reminucci, and we had a great conversation about like where do we go from here? If the people you're trying to fight against are the literal federal government, and who won't even bring a case against the ICE officer who shot and killed Renee Good. It feels like it's not even uphill. It's a 90-degree incline. It's rough to keep the faith, but overall, that the protests that I keep seeing from across the country and even here in DC, right in front of the White House, it instills some kind of hope. But overall, it's yeah.
Something we're also dealing with that I don't think we've ever dealt with in this way is the deluge of AI videos, especially on X. And people are still using X as this resource for news. It is not a resource for news the way it was, 4 years ago. So people are seeing fake videos of Alex Pretti. They're seeing fake videos and they're believing them. And they're getting so good that you have to have a really trained eye to be able to decipher. But now we're just dealing with, not only hearing this from the administration, just straight up lies, but we're seeing fake videos used to prop up those lies.
And listeners, if you got some feedback there in your ears, that's because John Parker's head literally just exploded during Dana talking about AI. His hands went up, so I have to assume that translated into some sort of audio feedback. John, I was going to ask you a few weeks ago, what's the vibe there now? I think my real question is, and you kind of made reference to this in the opener of, hey, we woke up and there wasn't another murder. How are you navigating starting a new day in terms of, all right, what is it we cover? What are we going to wake up into? I've not had that experience as a journalist, just being kind of in the nexus of places as you geographically are right now.
My head did explode, but the AI thing is such a problem.
Yeah.
And particularly when we are relying on a form of citizen journalism, essentially. And we do have we have one local company, media outlet, Mercado Media. If you want to see on the ground, like at the protest and everything, he's on YouTube. Status Quo has been here as well. So there are folks providing like real time actual, but the AI, not only is it creating fake evidence, it's replacing our jobs. So that's a whole other episode that you'll have to do, Ken. I think that the vibe here is they are everywhere. They're a everything everywhere all at once approach. And so we are also trying to be an everything everywhere all at once response. And I think, to see organizers said about 75 to 100,000 people 2 Fridays ago at that protest in downtown Minneapolis. This past Friday, organizers think it was about 40 to 50,000 people, again, in sub-zero temperatures. I think that we are seeing the results of how we organized for George Floyd. All of that knitting together, that organizational capacity stuck around. And 6 years later, we are able to see that it's all still there, and we are able to be in real time responding to what's going on. And I think that with the transition from Bavino to Tom Homan, we're seeing them documenting us. That's the new wave of what's happening right now. And we saw that with Renee Good's murder, is that Jonathan Ross was walking around. I don't know if you've seen that video where he's walking around her car, recording her with his phones, right? So he has a phone in one hand and then ultimately a gun in his right hand. And it's like, what are they doing? And so we're seeing a lot of that happening as well, where people are being recorded and then ICE agents are showing it up at their door preemptively, trying to intimidate them. They take away people's TSA pre-clearance, right? If they got that, they're recording them and then taking that away. They are creating the database. And so they're trying to have this chilling effect on the legal observers, on the media. I know we're going to get into that in a second here. It is that sort of next level draconian government, right, that they're doing. I mean, Huxley had nothing on the Trump administration, nothing. Like, it's his worst nightmare come to life. But yeah, it hasn't calmed down, I guess. You see less violence per se, but I think a lot of the cruelty is happening inside the Whipple Center, which is the building where they take people. That is a human rights catastrophe. And the one in Texas that they are flying people to immediately when they detain them here in the cities and they immediately get them out of here, that is a human rights catastrophe. So that is something I think that journalists, when they come out of the building, we're able to get, testimony from in there. When we have a congresswoman, like Congresswoman Robinson was able to get in there over the weekend, we're able to get her testimony out of that. But how we get information from inside there, we need more of that, because those are disaster zones right now.
So I just wanted to jump in on this AI thing. One of the things that I've found reporting on it is that one of the reasons ICE officers are filming is they're filming and it's being uploaded to a database, as you said, but it's using AI to map facial features and to track and to keep notes about people, which then connects to other various organizations and stuff. And that leads to, people, ICE agents arriving at your door if you did happen to be at a protest 3 weeks ago that they can now pull from. And it's crazy. I'm fairly new to journalism. I only graduated college, undergrad, in 2024. But I remember the collective journalism ethics class that we had, where we all were like, our professor had to be like, guys, the government is not reliable. And being somebody who is, grown up post 9/11, experiencing things very differently than I think a lot of other mainstream journalists has, just due to my age and experience, there's certain kinds of an understanding of, oh no, the government's going to step up and try to do the right thing, that seems to be kind of thrown out, or that I had to literally, me and a bunch of my peers at the time at American University had to have our professor, our distinguished professor, say the government is not reliable and you should never take those words as they are. Every single word, fact check it. And that is when I realized, oh, okay, we are like the only thing that's protecting the American people to a degree from a tyrannical government, which, as we have seeing is not going as well as it could be. But it's yeah.
Can I, on that database, they're locally, where we're trying to suss out, because Alex Pretti was at a demonstration a week before he was murdered. And so we're trying to figure out if they had captured him and knew who he was, and that's why they got so aggressive so quickly. They were like, "Oh, we're gonna show him a lesson because he kicked out a taillight of one of our cars, last week." It sounds crazy, that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but they're creating this database. There were 7 of them there. One of them could have been like, "Oh yeah, that's that guy. Let's get him."
And then there's the part where people are getting arrested, right? So we are crossing that line to journalists being arrested. The day before the national strike last week, on January 29th, 4 people were arrested in connection to an anti-ICE protest at a church in Minnesota, including independent journalist Georgia Fort and out LGBTQ plus journalist Don Lemon. Dana, what do we do with this one?
I mean, clearly this was a test. Clearly this is an intimidation tactic. Also, I think they very specifically went after Don because of how outspoken and on the ground Don has been. Don has really taken his new career as an independent journalist and run with it. He can be a polarizing figure, and I think that's another reason why they were like, let's go for Don. But I think it really, really backfired. I think for the most part, people in this country know what journalists do and know that is something that any journalist would have done. I think that this is going to be very negative, but also Georgia, let's be very clear. These were both Black journalists. One was LGBTQ plus and Black. This was a test to see how far they could go, and I think that they were rejected on multiple fronts on doing this one the real way, because it was laughable, and they went about it in the way that they wanted to, and now I think that both of them are going to have hearty lawsuits on their hands with this administration.
When one of my reporters was out covering the protest last Friday, they said, that you have to be on your phone the whole time in case I get Don Lemon. First of all, not a verb. Second of all, yeah, of course, I'm going to totally be ready and completely ready in case something comes up. But that fear that very quickly has permeated so many different journalists, that's real. That affects reporting.
Yeah. And I think that's the point, right? That's exactly what they were hoping to do.
Yep.
The racial component goes deeper, though, because it was a coalition of Black protesters and Black journalists in a and this has gotten lost, I feel, in the media coverage, that is a white nationalist church. That is not a bunch of, happy-go-lucky Lutherans that go in and sing some gospels and have a potluck afterwards with some hot dish. This is a group of people. The founder, Joe Rigney, is tied to Doug Wilson in Idaho. He actually works there now. They want to take over the government and implement white nationalism. That is why they care so much about this. Doug Wilson's church is connected to Pete Hegseth. Right? Pete Hegseth goes there. That's why they're so obsessed with this particular church. If it had just been another Methodist church or Lutheran church, they would not care. This was an assault of a coalition of Black people going into their white space, their white church. They believe ICE is their army that is going to lead them to taking over the government. That is the craziness that we're dealing with here with City's Church. So when you're hearing about that, please do not see a bunch of retirees singing songs and having a potluck. That is the church that the protest took place in.
By the way, I didn't know that until just now. Seriously. So
yeah, neither did I. I have not heard much coverage about that at all.
I want to recommend a piece from our friends over at Word in Black. There's an opinion piece just put out today called "Church Disruptions Are Justified" in their opinion section, and it's about the arrest of Don Lemon and Georgia Fort. So something definitely worth checking out.
Well, look, I feel like an infomercial right now because I'm going to keep saying, but wait, there's more. Because this would have been enough for our community for a while. But again, there's more because the Supreme Court, by the way, this feels like it was 6 months ago, but it was only a couple weeks ago. The Supreme Court heard arguments on 2 cases to determine whether state laws blocking trans girls from participating on girls' teams at publicly funded schools violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause and Title IX. Joe, you were actually in the room. I've never done that before. So can I just hear for a second? Because you did say that you graduated in 24. I think the rest of us assume it was 1924, but we accept that it indeed was only a year and a half ago. But what was that like for you, if I may say, as a young journalist, being in the Supreme Court covering this case? That just seems really cool.
Unfortunately, it was the best way that I could describe it was I felt extremely overwhelmed and underwhelmed all at the same time.
Yeah.
The building was beautiful besides the scaffolding out front and, the growing protesters on both sides screaming at each other, walking in. It felt like I was in some procedural show. It was beautiful. It was insane to see all of the justices right there and to see my name on a little note card, as an official journalist, to be a part of it. I never imagined myself to be covering national news. Nonetheless, to be, chosen to be in the literal Supreme Court, in the press little box. There's a few people I knew, luckily, who were, very kind to me and helped me kind of navigate the space. Chris Geidner, who does Law Dork, Substack, and writes, he's fantastic. He's a close friend of mine. We actually just got coffee 2 days ago, where we just kind of debrief and we're like, it's flood. It's a flood. It's not a trickle of news. It is a flood nonstop, and it's difficult to breathe. But back to being in the courtroom, it was just crazy. Megyn Kelly was 2 people next to me. Super surprised to see her in real life, and the fact that she's almost my height made me feel really tiny and petite and cute. But nonetheless, it was really just amazing and disheartening to hear what some of the questions were from the justices to the people. And I thought it was very interesting how everybody kind of was dancing around the main question, which they were all trying to get about in a long way, which was, what is the legal definition of sex? Because there isn't one nationally, at least enforced in the way that I think the conservatives on the court really want it to be. And we finally got an answer on behalf of Alito, who did straight up ask. And the answer was it's got to be the sex at birth. That's what we're going to take it and we're going to run with it. And now that's in government record. Obviously, it hasn't been decided on, but that is, nobody pushed back against that or asked why that is. But that was a big takeaway for me.
You mean LGBTQ plus Ohioan Chris Geidner. Just want to throw that in there.
Yes.
We're looking for affiliations anywhere we can get them. Dana, John, Supreme Court. That seems like a while ago.
I don't know. This Supreme Court has been found out to be using bad science, or at least accepting bad science that's submitted to them in amicus briefs. So I don't know. It feels like this court knows the decision in advance and will use whatever circuitous pretzel logic they can to get there. So it doesn't surprise me, Joe, that your experience of that was that they were just sort of wandering around the question before they finally got the answer. And I'm sure we'll find, some 17th century text and, some Greek reference to gender. And that's why American law has to be the way that it is. So I don't know. It's when you have the argument, it doesn't make sense, but they'll somehow we're not governed by sense. We're not governed by logic right now. The law is whatever they decide that it's going to be.
Some reverse engineering there of looking for a lot of op-eds out there that they're looking for the cases to suit their needs. And we're not even getting into this. I promise listeners we'll get into this next week, but not the least of which news developments of this new coalition of, well, a lot of them, Southern Poverty Law Center designated hate groups getting together to try to outlaw marriage equality and come up with a case that the Supreme Court will actually take, because they didn't take the case of thrice divorced Kim Davis. So a lot coming up. But for right this second, everyone, you are listening to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck from the Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ plus newsroom. Joining me this week, Dana Piccoli from News is Out, John Parker from The Gaily Show, and Joe Reberkenny from The Washington Blade. By the by, if you are not subscribed to This News is So Gay, what the heck are you waiting for? Subscribe to this podcast right this very second on your favorite podcasting app, so that new episodes automatically make their way to you. Well, it's time, folks. It is, of course, time for Glitter Bomb. This is where our roundtable shares stories of queer joy that they are seeing covered out there in the news. And my gosh, do we need some queer joy today and in these times. So let's set off a glitter bomb. John Parker, I have to start with you. Give us a story of queer joy that you are seeing out there that you want us to know about.
I don't know if y'all don't know it, but it just gives me so much pleasure to know that the #1 series, both in terms of popularity and apparently in viewing in Russia right now, is a gay hockey drama known as Heated Rivalry. It has a higher rating than Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad on their version of Rotten Tomatoes right now. So
I would have thought that would have been out loud from their propaganda laws. So I'm glad to hear that it's playing there.
They are illegally downloading it,
Okay,
apparently.
all right.
It is banned, and they're somehow getting it. So, yay, VPNs.
Yay, VPN. Someday I'll get to the 3rd episode. I'm just not there yet. Joe Reberkenny, give us some queer joy that you're seeing out there.
Not a whole lot on the national front, as we've discussed and as everybody's being deluged with. But a week and a half ago, there was a huge LGBTQ conference here in DC called Creating Change, that's put on by the National LGBTQ Task Force, where over 2,000 LGBTQ advocates descended on DC just to get together for 6 days and figure out how do we move forward. There's a big address that the president of the organization does called the State of the Moment, where it's kind of like an address, the State of the Union, but for specifically the LGBTQ rights movement. And where are we? What have we gained? What do we need to move forward to? And it was just refreshing to see so many people, despite all of the news, or actually probably because of it, more incentivized to get involved and to publicly put their face out there. There were, media, they're covering it. There were so many panels from topics including how to spice up your sex life and kink, to how to make a campaign to mention, LGBTQ rights to both state and national representatives. It was just a holistic kind of, there was a bunch of like even religious groups there saying, how to support your fellow LGBTQ Christian, Jews, Muslim people. It was a whole encompassing great few days of just queer people getting together and trying to create positive change.
Did I get yelled at the other day when PR legend Kathy Renna called me? She didn't butt dial me. She did, though, call me thinking I was in a different state than I was. So it was the equivalent of that. And she said something about creating change. And I very stupidly said to Kathy Renna, I've never been to creating change. Oh, boy, I got in trouble. So I will probably have to correct that at some point. Dana, give us some queer joy.
Okay, well, speaking of heated rivalry, I'm late to it, but I finally watched it. And I get the hype, but I'm also really excited for the next big, what I hope is big, Crave series, which is called Slow Pitch. And that is about a queer women's softball team. And it was adapted from the very funny web series of the same name with the same amazing Canadian creatives. One of my favorites, Karen Knox, is one of the creators and also stars as the character Boris. I highly recommend checking out the web series while we wait for the show's release. And if HBO Max doesn't pick it up, there's going to be a lot of angry lesbians.
There you go. I'm not messing with angry lesbians. I'll tell you that right now. Let's throw in a little bit more joy. The 37th annual GLAAD nominations are out, recognizing and honoring media for their fair, accurate, and inclusive representations of the LGBTQ plus community. So for our final quick queer question, we want another recommendation, something that's maybe not sports ball related, of something super queer that we should be watching or reading. Joe, give us a recommendation.
Yeah, I've got 3 because I couldn't narrow it down. I had a list of 10. The 3, Drag Race, as I already mentioned, I'm obsessed with this most recent season and all of them. Second one is going to be it's actually a movie I just watched with one of my very closest friends as it was snowing and cold. Trick from 1999. I'm a huge classic movie fan, and I fell in love. It was just like, I love that my problems of finding a place to hook up with people are resonant throughout time. And, Tori Spelling is hilarious in it. The whole thing, it just made me giggle the entire time. And then the last one is the Bald and Beautiful podcast. I love Trixie and Katya, and I can't go a week without listening to it. So yeah, those are my 3.
I did not have on my bingo card today a Trick shout out. You have no idea how that movie affects some of us. And being in New York City at the time and being an undergrad at the time and going to piano bars, I perhaps know every word of that movie. Dana, give us a culture recommendation.
Well, speaking of classic movie, 40 years this year for Desert Hearts. I want to give that a little shout out. We'll be celebrating 40 years.
Wow.
But my recommendation is the audiobook of V.E. Schwab's Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. It's a lesbian vampire book. It's so good. The audio version is fantastic. The narrating is amazing. Check it out.
There it is, John Parker.
Okay, so for Black History Month, I've got a groundbreaking book. It's called A Black Queer History of the United States. I believe it is the first of its kind, but it takes you from pre-America all the way through to today, and it is absolutely stunning in its scope. And it's a history text, but it doesn't read like one of those dry history books like from your History 101 classes. So it is a very good read. And I also want to give a shout out to David Reddish, formerly or still with Occupy Democrats, but now has his own show, the first official spinoff from Occupy Democrats. And it's appropriately called The David Reddish Show. And he has a really cool neon sign behind him that I'm super jealous of. But yeah, it just premiered and you can watch it on YouTube.
I'm only, just so folks know, I'm only 60% listening because I'm singing the song from Trick in my head this entire time.
Remember it.
I literally enter you. Yeah, no,
Enter.
yeah. So thanks, Joe. Really appreciate
You're
that.
welcome. I'm glad
Yeah.
I could help.
Okay, there's no question what I'm doing tonight now. We want to hear what all of you are working on. Joe, what are you working on?
Yeah, I just got to interview Representative Andrea Salinas from Oregon's 6th Congressional District. She just got made vice chair of the Equality Caucus. So I got to talk to her about why that role is important. She talked extensively about how her daughter, who identifies as a lesbian, really helped push her to, embrace the LGBTQ community and, just to be a better lawmaker. I also just talked to Daniel Hernandez, Vice President of Political Programming at the LGBTQ Victory Fund, about their list of candidates that they're endorsing coming up. And that one should be up in the next 2 or 3 days. And yeah, those are the 2 big ones I'm working on.
No one from Ohio yet in the endorsements, hoping there's someone in this next round. John Parker, what are you working on?
So one of the major areas that ICE has been focusing on is Columbia Heights, which is literally right across the road from me. It's a city, super diverse, very working class. And so we're going to do a special episode focusing in on Columbia Heights with both the state senator who represents it, and hopefully, they haven't confirmed yet, so hopefully by when you listen to this on February 5th, the who is running for the state house, the current representative, is retiring. And so the leading candidate hopefully will be joining us as well to take a deep dive into what's happening in that particular city. So that'll come out on the 5th.
There you go. Dana, I think I know the answer, but let's confirm it. What's going on with you?
So very soon, you'll be able to listen to a companion podcast all about the LGBTQ plus media mapping project that was released this fall, that was covered here on this pod, and also on the Buckeye Flame, and on the Gaily Show, and in Washington Blade. We're everywhere. So the series is 7 episodes long, and it tackles some major through lines brought up through the mapping project, like news deserts, funding, collaboration. Ken is a special guest on one of the episodes, and all of them will be available to listen to right here on the Buckeye Flame Podcast Network. Like, by the time this airs, it'll be ready. You'll be able to listen to all 7 episodes.
Exactly. I feel it's a little bit like that U2 album that, against everyone's will, got downloaded to them, because if you subscribe to this podcast, you're about to get 7 episodes of The Map of Us, but you will enjoy it more. It wasn't
I'm not
a good
sorry
album.
about it, Ken. I'm not sorry. It's a really good stuff. It's important to listen to.
Well, so much coming up. And I just have to say, I'm so appreciative to the 3 of you for your work, for navigating even a conversation like this, which I know is so fraught because, yes, of course, we're talking about our professional lives, but my gosh, is this affecting us as humans? So with the grace and the sensitivity and the depth that you all brought to this, I am so very appreciative. Dana Piccoli, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
John Parker, still waiting on my invite to talk about Buffy on the Gaily Show, but hopefully coming up soon. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
And Joe Reberkenny, what a treat. Thanks for joining us for the first time.
Thank you. Hopefully it's not the last.
Definitely not. I'm Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame. And if you liked this episode of This News is So Gay, please share it with a friend. Subscribe so that you do not miss out on our next episode. Send an email on over to editor@thebuckeyeflame.com. That's me, to let us know your thoughts, and rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. This News is So Gay is a product of the Buckeye Flame, a scrappy queer nonprofit newsroom. Become a recurring donor today for as little as $12.50 a month, which truly enables programming like this. In the meantime, read LGBTQ plus news, share the stories of LGBTQ plus reporters, and support the work of LGBTQ plus newsrooms. Until next week, friends.